My paper on spina bifida and comparing and contrasting prenatal versus postnatal surgery, meaning in utero versus afterwards, which is typically the postnatal is what we've always done, and now in the past, well, it's actually been 15 years since the first time they're doing in utero surgery. I have this picture that everybody can kind of get an idea of what happens. Spina bifida is the easier term for myelomeningocele. Myel being, it can be the spinal cord or bone marrow, so in this case it is bone marrow. And then meninges, the membranes around the spinal cord. And cele being tumor or hernia. And in this case, what happens within the first formation, when the spine is the first thing that's forming in utero in the fetus, and it actually becomes herniated and does not close. And for the most part, it happens in the lumbar region. And when you think about it, as the spine is building, obviously more pressure, from the top is going to push and push and push, and then when it doesn't close, it bubbles out, like you see in that picture. The biggest thing that I learned is that it's 99% preventable. Spina bifida is caused from a lack of folic acid and B12, and it's very rare for women to have a body that is against folic. There are some women that cannot retain folic acid in their body, but you'll see spina bifida more in poorer areas or in other countries because the lack of knowledge, the lack of medical care, things like we learned in our environmental science class, that knowledge is power. So if women don't realize that they're going to have a family, they should be taking their folic acid and their vitamins, and it actually prevents things like spina bifida. So originally, I talk too much. So originally they would repair, where'd that picture go? Okay, so they would repair it post-term after the baby was born. Some pretty graphic pictures where they would remove, the fluid and they would stitch back. But obviously it's already done some permanent damage. Some children are worse than others, where they have problems with their bowel, because down, I liked this picture of the spine because it really shows you what gets affected in that region. It's all your leg muscles, it's your bowel and bladder, which is why a lot of children have Canadian crutches, or they even have problems with continence and that sort of thing. So now the doctors decided to try in utero, repairing it at 11 to 14 weeks. This picture is amazing. They actually take the uterus out, make an incision, and do the repair within the womb. The results are nearly 50%, over 50% better, that children are walking, full bladder function. The other major thing with spina bifida is that the spinal fluid backs up into the cerebrum and into your head, so that they wind up needing shunts. A family friend had a shunt put in because she was born with spina bifida, and she was constantly with infections because it's like a straight, the fluid would get infected even though, because it's not draining properly. So this surgery in utero seems like an amazing, I found multiple instances where there's a little boy named Samuel, another boy named Colby, who are living amazing lives because of it. Now, it is high risk because 60% who have the in utero surgery end up going into labor preterm. They go in early. But this major study that was done back in 2009 showed that the deaths due to preterm birth and the deaths due to advanced spina bifida were the same. So it's a risk either way that, you know, could your child have a better life? My friend Tamara passed away at 26 years old. So had the surgery been available to her parents, would they have opted for it? Would they not? Would she have had a better life? So, you know, as science advances, it's something to consider. So I hope that they keep doing the research and keep doing the studies so that it is an option for parents. You know, it scares a lot of people because the baby's so tiny. This is Samuel. He's now almost 4 years old, and he's perfectly fine. They still consider him having been born with spina bifida, but he didn't need a shunt because the fluid released on its own. And they try not to take the baby out of the uterus, but he actually reached his hand out and grabbed the doctor's finger during the surgery. It's an amazing photograph. So, and those parents were willing because it was like cutting edge when they fought to have this surgery done for their son. And they've since then actually had another healthy child and then another child with spina bifida, and because it's in the process of being an approved surgery, they were no longer able to have the surgery done for their second child that was born with spina bifida. But yeah, it's pretty incredible. Pretty incredible. So that's what I learned. I hope that they keep going, because even though a life handicapped is better than no life at all, the studies are showing that the risk, to me, from what I learned in my paper anyway, is that the risk is equal. You know, that you're going to be able to give them a better life if you take the risk at an early age versus waiting till after they're born and they wind up handicapped and maybe not even living as long as they could. So
part of the controversy was from people with spina bifida,
right,
saying that, you know, I would rather live handicapped than not at all.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You know, don't take my life away. The other, I'm glad you said that, because the other huge thing, and it's huge to me, you know, everybody has their own opinion, but is that the fetus, abortion is still a huge controversy. So is the fetus at 11 to 14 weeks a human, or is it not? And that controversy has stood in the way of scientific development because they want to say, well, it's not a life yet. Well, I'm sorry, but this little boy's hand, and this is what the photographer said. He said, you know, I never really had a staunch opinion on pro-choice or whatever. He said, but when I took this photograph of this, you know, 1 pound baby reaching its hand out, he's like, that's a human being. And it is. It's a human being. You know, so the fact that that can stand in the way of scientific development too is really sad. But that was the other major hurdle that doctors were facing, was that they're like, well, it's not a life yet. That's all.
Yay!